It has been quite a full, beautiful, and hectic day of camp, indeed. So my name is Dr. Nia Nunn. I'm a professor at Ithaca College in the Department of Education. And I serve as the board president here at Southside Community Center. Thank you for being in this glorious space. Let's give Southside a hand. Our fantastic executive director, she's here and she's gonna make her way out here, but we are gonna send her all the way home. You all, today we had a real scare with a tree that fell onto the playground. Thank goodness indeed, our children were safe, and there were very few that were actually on the playground, but it was really scary. So you can imagine we're just balancing our energy and hugging the babies all day. I'm so grateful that we are free from that scare. So again, you are here at Southside Community Center. There's some familiar faces out here, of course, but some new faces as well. So I will say that you are in a space of greatness. Indeed, this historic Black space that was founded by a group of Black women called the Frances Harper Women's Club. All right, and our first executive director, yes, honoring our ancestors is something that we do on a regular basis, and we teach our young people as well. I'm excited to teach our young people about Dr. James L. Gibbs, the first executive director here at Southside for 10 years, right? And there are still, some of our elders who tell the stories of their incredible interactions with Dr. James L. Gibbs as children. Including Lucy Brown, y'all. She's got some really glorious stories. And so many of us are privileged to have those stories, but also privileged to have grown up here. So I introduced myself as the president, but I have spotted our fantastic executive director, and that is Miss Siobhan Bunch. Told them about the day. Oh, the day? Yeah, I told them. So they already know. Okay. It's a joy to serve in this leadership capacity. As Siobhan and I were little girls in this space, we have evidence of us in the gym as Girl Scouts, as 4- and 5-year-olds in the space. It's really beautiful to serve as leaders, as mothers in the space, and we're truly grateful for your presence. Anything you want to say to the people before you transition?
No, just thank you for coming. Thank you for educating those of us that are sort of in the political realm, but not really. But thank you, community members, for just coming and showing your support and being here.
Yes. And there are so many different ways that folks can support Southside Community Center, of course, with donations and just being present on the scene, establishing relationships. We have a huge event coming up probably the next couple weekends. So the weekend, it's also grassroots, but there's stuff going on everywhere. But we have nearly 300 Black cyclists coming to Ithaca, New York. Yes, who will be the Major Taylor extraordinaires. We experienced them last year, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I loved cycling. It's a whole culture and energy. I'll replace it with yoga or something. But the energy is awesome of these committed cyclists. And so it's a full weekend of adventure. On Thursday, we'll have a festival, and that's when folks will be coming in from California, New Jersey, Georgia, all over. And so we're super excited for them to come back. There's Friday, we have from Girl Trek. We have folks from Girl Trek who are coming. Yeah, Vanessa.
Very nice, Vanessa.
She's coming.
Oh, yeah.
I know. I'm trying to get her here on Thursday. Maybe you can help. So anyway, we're super excited about the folks that are on their way. So Vanessa will be here Friday and Saturday. And then the cyclists, y'all, are going to bike all the way from Myers Park to Harriet Tubman's house. Yes. That's it. So we're super excited. So please tune into our Facebook. That will be the most detailed in terms of what to expect that weekend. And then the weekend after that is the end of CMEP, the Community Unity Music Education Program, which we're operating right now. It's live, it's amazing. And we're super excited to have a huge fundraiser festival July 30th, and it'll be located at the Bernie Milton Pavilion, where Black Hands Universal is operating Saturday markets every Saturday. But on this Saturday, our babies will be performing, and so we're hopeful that you will come, that you will be supportive of our young folks and the incredible work that is happening at CMEP. Give it up for CMEP. Yes, we're super excited. And so before we introduce the candidates, or give each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves, with this introduction, I would love to talk to you a little bit about what I teach here at CMEP and in our community. We talk about the power of Black joy, right? Right? Once upon a time, Southside was one of the only places where Black folks could go for some of the most basic resources. And one of the most important resources, honoring the self and honoring the culture. And so here today, as times have changed and shifted, there are still drastic needs, critical needs. And so I'm hoping that we are able to address some of them. I know we only have a short period of time today, but especially as we grow to have a better understanding of this role and this responsibility. I'll tell you that truth. I'm curious to make that explicit connection. And so we talk about Black joy here at Southside Community Center and in CMEP. And we say that you have Black joy if you have two things. This is how you get started. The first thing is having the ability to acknowledge the ways in which we are taught anti-Blackness on a regular basis. And here's the key. How young can you go? How young can you go as it relates to what you were learning about Blackness and Black people? So this is some of the really incredible work that we are doing for ourselves and for one another. And then the second thing, I'm sorry, I'm used to kids. Can you all go like this? Okay, I don't feel like I'm doing work unless it's like an exchange. And so the second thing that we talk about here is you have Black joy when you have the ability to recognize the beauty, the brilliance, and the boldness of our people. Okay? And that's why Black joy ends up being a gift for everybody to put in your pocket, because what we say is that we're all learning negative messages about Blackness and Black people on a regular basis, and it starts young. It starts very young. And so what we're trying to do is equip folks. You be ready, because it's coming. And when you have Black joy, you're able to do transformative things, right? And so I'm super excited to have each candidate introduce themselves and have a response to this concept of Black joy that is so central to our identity at Southside. So let's give them a hand so they can sit down and get comfortable and situated. But again, we thank you all for being here. And so an opportunity to introduce yourselves and your response to this concept of Black joy here at Southside Community Center.
I'm going to defer to you. Oh, you can go first, Liz. It's your hometown. You got it. There you go.
Well, thank you. I'll stand back up.
Yes,
that's
fine.
okay.
I'm going to do that a few times too.
You're going to go up and down?
Yeah, up and down.
Okay,
That's
well,
how we do.
I'm Catholic by faith, and so I'm used to a lot of up and down. And up and
There you
down.
go. There you go. Let's do it.
And then we might kneel
There
at
you
some
go.
point,
That's
and we might
it.
stand back up
Bring
again.
it.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's the background that I come from. There's a lot of standing and a lot of kneeling and a lot of recognizing our ancestors and the heritage that we bring. And in that vein, I am deeply grateful to be here at Southside Community Center. Thank you so much, Dr. Nia, for that introduction and for that exposition on what we are learning here together today and the connections that you hope to see us make.
That's it.
It's tremendous to be in this space, with this great history, and with the future that we have ahead of us.
That's right.
And we are at a crossroads here in America today, and it is important to be very intentional about the heritage that we bring with us and the path that we are walking going forward.
That's right.
And I'm mindful also that this forum, this Black Town Hall, follows many, many Black Town Halls in the course of history. And there's a proud history of Black Town Halls in making sure that we, the people of this great democracy that is the United States of America, are representing and advocating and constantly moving toward that ideal that we set forth for ourselves. I'm mindful that this particular Black Town Hall is in the name of Gino Bush. Gino. And Gino, we know here in Ithaca and in Tompkins County, Gino was intentionally focused on local action and on getting the work done in the community, real achievement of real results that made a real statement about what we are going forward, but more than a statement was concrete action. And for all of us to take that history and that recognition that Gino Bush is who we're honoring today in this Black Town Hall. He appeared on the flyers. He's who we've been talking about. That is something I would like to ask all of us to take great care in thinking about as we go forward, because that very local action at a time of such tremendous volatility, at a time when so many are looking at the Supreme Court, at the presidency, at Congress to save us, we can all know that this local action is where we can really leave our mark. And when Dr. Nia talks about Black joy,
Yes.
and the intentionality that we need to bring to our participation in the community, that really speaks to me on a very hyper-local level. That is the work that I have done throughout my career. That is the intentionality that I have brought to my profession. I'm Leslie Danks Burke, and I'm running for New York State Senate. And thank you. And many of you have heard me say those words before, because this is not the first time I have run for New York State Senate. I have run twice before. I ran in 2016 in a deeply gerrymandered district when the entire state of New York carved up Tompkins County and Ithaca because no one Republican wanted to have all the Democrats in Tompkins County in his district. And so they sliced it up and they gave a third of us to each of 3 Republicans, and I stood up in that 32% Democratic district. I was the only Democrat to run, and I fought back. Because even when the stakes are against us, even when defeat seems all but certain, we have to take a stand. We have to stand up. And to me, that reflects back on some of what you're describing. When you talk about Black joy and the need to recognize the very, very earliest moments that we saw these pressures come at us, we have to carry those forward, and we have to stand up even in the darkness. And so I ran in 2016, and in that 32% Democratic district, I lost. I got 45% of the vote. And it was a proud loss, because that moves the conversation. And so then I stood up again, and I ran in 2020. And I lost again, and I lost with gusto. Because that's what you do. You stand up even in the face of darkness, even when times are so challenging that you may not win exactly on the ground, but you make gains that we lay for the foundation going forward. And today, in 2022, I'm running again, and we have a new district. We who have stood up, and there are so many of us here just gathered on this lawn, we have stood up together over the last 10 years, and we have built a progressive network across this region that they cannot shut down. And that's because we chose to fight. We chose to fight not just in election years, but day in and day out. Now, we have a district that is much closer to 50-50. On paper, it's a Democratic district. We know, though, that that's not always how it goes. We know that sometimes people hide their views behind labels. We know this when we look at the history of racism in this country. Again, looking at intentionality, looking at when we first learned, we know that the truth is not always what's said. And so even though this is a district that is, by some counts, 55% Democratic, if you look at how the vote totals actually go out, by some counts 58% Democratic if you look at how Joe Biden did in 2020, we know that may not be how it actually plays out, especially in this year when human rights are under a full frontal assault. The gains that we have brought over the last 150 years are in danger of getting rolled back. And so what I bring to the conversation is a deep history and deep policy experience over 15 years in this region, standing up for single-payer health care, standing up for Planned Parenthood, making sure that Planned Parenthood is not just accessible for those who want to access abortion, but also for the 1 in 5 people in our community who rely on Planned Parenthood for basic health care, for cancer screenings, for preventative medicine. Why I've stood up for community colleges. Why I've stood up for jobs, for union jobs, for fair wages for nurses, for community college funding.
Yep, and we're going to dive into a whole list of fantastic
Okay, so
things.
I
I'm
won't
gonna
go
wrap
into
up a
all
little
of my
bit in
details.
5 minutes, you know?
I will, 5 minutes.
No,
I
and then
didn't
we're going
hear
to
that
pass
part.
it on so she can have 5 minutes. No worries.
You got it.
No worries.
So we'll have a chance to talk more about what I bring to the
we will.
conversation, and I appreciate that. But what I want to leave you with here is hope. Because we must have hope in the darkness. We must act with love. What we have is love and love again. And we must, in the words of Maya Angelou, have the courage to hold on to that love. We can do it. I know we can because we have done it before. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors who have carried us forward before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie. Thank you so much. We'll give you a good chunk of time to introduce yourself, who you are, the flavor of what you're working with, and what Black Joy means to you.
Can y'all still see me if I'm sitting down?
No,
You
stand
can
up.
stand up? Oh, okay. Well,
The team says that.
okay. Clearly, y'all have no problem expressing your opinion. Well, all right.
You're an
So-
empathize. It's never.
Oh, that's just the sentiment of most rooms. So first I want to thank Dr. Nia and Siobhan and everyone here at the Southside Community Center for creating this space for us here today. And not just simply today, but the grand scope of work that you provide to children in Ithaca and the surrounding area. And what I often find with resources like the Southside Community Center is that we can tout all of the great work that they do, but we often don't put our money where our mouth is. And so I think it's critically important that not only do we as a community, but also even at the state level, really give equitable funding to entities such as the Southside, because they reach many folks who often fall through the cracks. And so in thinking about, your question around Black Joy, I have as soon as you said that, what came to mind for me was my parents. I am the daughter of Gail, the granddaughter of Evelyn. I am also the daughter of Tyrone, the granddaughter of Jerome. And these are my family members. And I remember from my mother specifically, she was a janitor. And my father is a painter. Not in a way of like a Picasso or a Basquiat or anything like that, but literally a painter of buildings and streets, right? People who are doing those day-to-day activities that often go unnoticed and, quite frankly, disregarded. And so Black Joy for me are those lessons that my parents taught me very early on. Now, ironically, I grew up born and raised in Binghamton on the south side of Binghamton. And so those lessons that I learned very early on about the importance of being your brother and sister's keeper, always asking questions around why do things function the way they do, and also who often gets left out when decisions are made. And so Black Joy are messages I received very early on about being firm in who we are as a people. And that's not simply relegated to race and ethnicity, but who we are as human beings. And so oftentimes when these conversations are had, people think that by elevating the voices of folks who are most marginalized means erasing others. And that's not what it means, right? What it means is that it is a collective and intentional recognition of the humanity of folks who often get left out, intentionally. And so Black Joy for me is thinking about also that by all accounts and purposes, I shouldn't be here. When you think about the history of marginalized people in this country and every single step that was taken to repress and oppress, right, all the way up until today, I shouldn't be here. And so for me, joy, Black Joy specifically, is liberation, and is shared liberation of all of us together as a community, because we not only recognize that painful history, but we also commit to recognizing when we, in the present day, engage in behavior that reinforces that oppressive mindset. And that means, even within our own communities, having those difficult conversations when we do things such as dog whistling, when we do things such as mistaking the janitor and mistaking someone for a janitor who was actually the CEO of an organization, right? It's those covert moments that are just as important to recognize, because they are just as impactful as the overt ones. And so in thinking about this in my own life experience and how I even got into public service, I almost feel like it was inevitable because my parents were very involved in our community, and it was one of those things I would say we were voluntold in my family to really become involved in our community. So both my parents very involved in unions. I'm a proud union member myself. And yes, it's okay to clap for unions. And so for me, this journey into public service was something that was always given to me as a message, because as we know, in a lot of our cultures that are shared, giving back, supporting family, all of those things are very critical and necessary. And so I started off doing organizing at the age of 15. I just didn't know it was called community organizing by working in my church. And so in faith circles that I belong to, as Leslie said, you kneel or stand, we're all about call and response, because we got to know you with this. So y'all with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Call and response is very important. Also, one of my favorites is I'm not going to hold you for long. We already know what that means. We're going to be here for a long time. So in thinking about my own journey into public service, it was for me in community organizing through my church and then subsequently getting into healthcare when I graduated from college, getting more involved with healthcare reform and issue politics such as that, but also electoral politics and working on other candidate campaigns. And I often tell folks it wasn't a part of my 5, 10, 20-year plan to run for office. I actually wanted to become a pediatric neurosurgeon. And so I actually have my degree in neuroscience. And so for me, I was always struck by my passion for community service and science, and always tried to figure out how do I bring both together. And so healthcare policy was that conduit for me. And so in fast forwarding with regards to the comment I said earlier about I shouldn't be here. So I was highly encouraged by the community where I'm from to run for office. And I was 26 at the time, and I definitely thought I was too young. There definitely were other women in terms of en masse in elected office, let alone people of color. And so I thought, well, I just need more time if I elected to do that. But again, because of the disconnect between some of our elected leadership to the issues that were impacting my community, such as high incidences of poverty, inadequate housing, many things, the community I was organizing in pushed me to run. So I did. Threw my hat in the ring, and it was definitely a trial by fire. That's putting it modestly. But by all accounts, again, wasn't supposed to be here. So typically you would see an 8% voter turnout on a city council election, maybe. We had a 24% voter turnout, and I'll tell you why. We intentionally engaged folks who were left out of the political process, folks who were maybe active but haven't been active in a long time, and folks who are very active. And the campaign was reflective of the diversity of the community. And so I ran against the city council president not once but twice. My first time going around, because as you know, in New York, we have fusion voting, so you can run on multiple lines at the same time. So that was my first foray into elected office, but we were successful. And I was able to serve on city council for 2 consecutive terms for a total of 8 years. And make history in my community that I grew up in. Right? I became the first African American ever elected to city council, the youngest at that time. And so bringing it to the present moment of why this question of Black joy is so important, we are in a time where, for me, joy is often taken away intentionally through this continuous effort to repeal our rights as human beings. And at the same time, we have leaders that are sitting on the sidelines saying, well, we have to compromise. We just keep compromising, and always raise the question at the expense and cost of whose? Whose humanity is being sacrificed along the way just to maintain power and position? And so it is my hope that in this election, but more importantly beyond this election, that this moment in time that we're in is really building blocks for a continued movement to change that experience of joy, not just for a term, not just for a year, but moving forward for every single human being.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And so I know that we have some audience questions. And again, we want to talk a little bit more concretely about like what is this role, this job. But before we get there, we have a little game I want to play with you all, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And so I'm going to pull out my timer, and you each will have, let's say, 2 minutes to name one current Black leader, national leader that you are inspired by and why.
Okay. Are we going in any particular order?
Yeah. Let's see. Which one you go first? Let's hear Leslie. You want to go first? Ready? And begin. Current Black leader, national leader, who and why that you're inspired by right now.
So I am currently inspired by Michelle Obama. And that is because Barack Obama was my constitutional law professor in law school. I went to University of Chicago Law School. And back then, he had just lost his own state race, and he was a law professor and he was a community organizer, and then he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and ran again and won, and the rest is history. But behind Barack Obama was Michelle Obama. And we always knew in law school that Michelle was outstanding. She was a person who moved mountains. And I want to see many, many more people stepping up to provide the role that Michelle provides, which is real leadership day in and day out, real strength, real opportunity. It's not about Barack. It's not about the president. It's about what all the rest of us are doing.
Right. Excellent. Please.
Sure. So my leader I'm aspiring and look up to is actually LaTosha Brown.
Okay.
LaTosha Brown is the founder of Black Voters Matter, and the reason why I really follow a lot of things that she does is because of this. There are many efforts to remove our rights to vote, and I often remark that whoever controls the narrative controls the outcomes, right? Because that forms and formulates public opinion. And so she said something today actually around why it's important that we vote. And oftentimes it's like, well, we keep voting in the same type of person. They do this on the campaign trail, get in office, and it's selective amnesia. I added that part. But essentially, what she said was so poignant because this last piece here to wrap it up. She said that oftentimes when marginalized folks go into these spaces, when decisions are made, such as in our criminal justice system, such as in our schools, that the folks on the other side not only don't look like them, but also don't fully understand the impacts of these policies on marginalized communities. And so she said, I would much rather that we are in these positions knowledgeable about the impacts, and so your vote is the way in which people get in these positions, whether it's your district attorney, whether it is your school board member, whether it is your mayor or senator, they all get into office because of a vote. And so that is why I look up to her, because there's a lot of efforts to take away our right to vote, and I really appreciate and value the work that she's doing all across this country on that important issue.
Awesome. And perfect within the time frame for both of you. This is just, first of all, so appreciate both people that you acknowledged. LaTosha Brown, she spent the day with us a year ago here. I got to give her a tour of Ithaca. I see everything, and she's phenomenal. We're still very much in touch. So I'm super excited that you mentioned her, and I would like to be in touch with Michelle Obama while we're speaking of her. We have aspirations and dreams of bringing her. We plan to emphasize Eleanor Roosevelt's visit.
The Obamas got really, really hard to reach.
I believe it, right?
Yeah.
We're finding that.
Yeah.
But we, we're all about.
But there's only, what they say, 7 degrees of separation.
Well,
That's
she
it.
understands the depth and history of this place. We're about to be 100 years old. So putting it out there.
Yeah. Manifest it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's what I just said. With Eleanor Roosevelt having been here in 1938. And let me tell you this. That year, she was here in 1938 in February, and I found out that in 1938 in May, she had a straight-up black girl magic tea party in the White House. 85 little black girls, all in the D.C., Maryland area, and there's photos of it too. I like to think she got that idea. I'm just saying, claiming that black girl alchemist energy she got from Southside and brought it to the White House. Anyway, next game question. Just 1 minute this time. Okay. And we want you to, you both talked about current black leaders in the national frame. Now I want you to speak to one, because I'm sure there are many, your most inspirational black movement from our history. 1 minute to breathe as you think, and we can begin with Miss Leah this time.
Yeah, I would stand up. As we've been instructed.
Yeah, good minute.
So I would say it's hard to pick just one movement, only because movements build upon the previous movements. I would say most certainly the civil rights movement, because there were a lot of instructions given, right, that have impacted many subsequent movements, even up until the Black Lives Matter movement presently. And so one of the things that stood out to me the most was that not just simply nonviolent resistance, but I mean hardcore strategic planning, not just for a year or for an election cycle, but for 5, 10, 15, 20 years that we often find in Republican circles. They have a 30-year plan and we're watching it unfold right now. So that would be the one I would lift up. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, Ms. Leslie, 1 minute. Your favorite Black movement, most inspirational movement from our history. At least one, I'm sure there are many.
There are many, but this is the one that comes to mind most for me, is the movement to put Black leaders into the White House during FDR's presidency. And I do believe that Eleanor Roosevelt was very receptive to that, and she was the entry point for a lot of Black leaders who were able to begin to access the president's ear, FDR's ear. But if you go back and look, and I know that we have a historian here in the audience who's studied this to some extent, but if you go back and you look at what was happening in the 1930s, this was in the middle of the Great Depression. We were seeing real challenges facing America. And what we saw was Black leaders quietly stepping up and claiming space and taking up the air so that that conversation was happening in the White House. And that 1930s movement is what gave us workforce development, it gave us national parks, it gave us all kinds of wonderful things, and it was a precursor to the civil rights movement 30 years later.
Yeah, right. Good, good, good. Okay, on 30 seconds. Favorite Black author, and if you can name 2 of their books, even better, but favorite Black author. Let's begin with Leslie.
Can we have 2 authors with 2 books, or no? One author with 2 books. One author, 2 books.
Yeah, go for it.
So I have to say Toni Morrison, because Toni Morrison is who I read all through high school in the 1980s.
Nice.
The Bluest Eye is hands down my favorite of her. And then I don't know that I can pick a second favorite, because there's just such a wealth after that.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And check out her fantastic, the artwork of Toni Morrison right on the corner on your way out. Favorite
me,
author, 2 books.
Well, the one that stood out to me is Octavia Butler.
Yes.
For those who aren't familiar, Octavia Butler does a lot of sci-fi work, but also intersects racism and kind of what it looks like in the past, but also present. So one of her very famous books, Kindred, is a really great book, because it talks about, again, this juxtapositioning of both race, policy, socioeconomic status, you name it. So she's one of my favorites.
Yeah, you say Kindred.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yes, and the talent. Yes. Okay. One more question. All right, and this takes us right into perhaps your platform, your base, your heartbeat.
And now we have only 15 seconds to say that.
Right. I'll give you just a little bit more time. This time I'm actually going to give you 2 minutes, because I think there's some juice to play with. And so I want you to think about the Kwanzaa principles. All right? And perhaps there's a favorite Kwanzaa principle, and that you can speak to, and it's linked to your platform, its relevance to your purpose, your heartbeat, how you are navigating, especially this campaign. So a Kwanzaa principle to name and reflect on for a chunk of time. And Ms. Leah, would you like to begin?
All right. Well, the one I want to lift up actually rhymes with my name, is Nia. And though it's spelled differently. Nia means purpose. And in thinking about this campaign, but more so kind of why we're all here. And I don't just mean because of the form, I mean just literally why we're all here. My purpose in running is to, again, continue to elevate our communities and build unity, and not just for a campaign cycle, but forever. And so, but you need leadership that actually gets it, and not just gets it on like a tangential level or because it sounds good, it's a nice sound bite. No, they really get it because it's the core of who they are. And you can see that in the work that they do from a past tense, but also in the present, but also their vision for the future. Am I all right?
You got another
Oh,
minute.
I have another minute. Okay, I was waiting. Okay, I'm waiting for the president to come in. And so in thinking about our larger purpose as a community and what we have as an opportunity is to really continue to hold each other up, but also accountable, right? When it comes to not just simply policies, because you can pass policies all day. Where the rubber meets the road is where it's implemented. Because if the folks implementing it don't get it, the policy is going to fall short. And so, again, this is about a collective purpose and continuing to commit to that, even when we are faced with deep, profound adversity. It's like, how do you stay committed and connected to your purpose as a leader, but more importantly, our purpose as a community?
That's perfect. 20 seconds. Thank you. Yes, Leslie. A favorite Kwanzaa principle, and it's linked to your campaign or your platform.
So my favorite principle would be love. And I don't know if that's a Kwanzaa principle.
It's not, but it's relevant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak about love.
Okay.
And that is because it is what directs my campaign.
Yeah.
Love is the hardest challenge that we all face. And if we lead with love and we strive to reach love, then we can achieve dignity. But too many of us fall back. Love is not about flitting around happily springtime. Love is about doing the deep work to bring our communities forward. My campaign is an extension of my career and my life. I act these principles whether I'm running for office or not. And it's because I believe so passionately in lifting up all of us together. That's why I serve on a community college board. That's why I've worked in healthcare. That's why I teach students. That's why I practice civil rights law. What we need in our communities is access to opportunity for all, and we can only do that through love.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much. Fun times, right? Getting to know folks and all of the layers. And so we're truly grateful. Thank you for your responses to our questions. And now we have questions from the audience. And so I want to, I'm zapping in and paying close attention to the time and really honoring everyone's time. And so we'll give each candidate 2 minutes to respond to each question. And we have a good chunk of them that we'll start with. Siobhan picked some good ones. And so this first question, Leah, we can begin with you.
Okay, no pressure.
What? All right. What policy would you push for? What policy would you push for New York State to increase access to affordable housing for middle income to the unhoused? Sorry, let me read that question again, like I make the children do. What policy would you push for New York State to increase access to affordable housing for middle income to the unhoused?
So that's a great question, and it's actually something I've worked on for a long time. I would say, well, in the current budget, Governor Hochul allotted several billions of dollars over a 5-year a time frame. Are folks familiar with this? To create affordable housing options across the state. And so what I think is often important when it comes to providing financial resources, and this is even from my own experience as a legislator, you have to do it in conjunction with those folks who are on the ground. And what that looks like is working with community housing development organizations that actually provide and build housing. So where I am in Binghamton, Metro Interfaith, First Word Action Council, there are other organizations like that here that provide actual direct housing, like from soup to nuts, right? The other piece that I think is important from a policy standpoint when it comes to housing is accountability, right? And that looks like several ways. So good cause is also a legislative policy that is on the table, right? And there's a lot of misinformation about it, right? It's not designed to penalize property owners. It's really designed to make folks accountable who are bad actors when it comes to housing, and that is not at the expense of renters, right? And at the same time, there are other policies around supporting folks to go on a pathway to become homeowners. So like your first-time buyer, home buyer programs, right? That help people to get access to capital to get into their homes. So those would be a few of the policies I would push for, and several of them are actually happening right now. One hasn't happened yet with good cause, but that is something I would definitely push for.
Great, thank you. And that's just time right now.
I'm doing good.
Yes, let's see. We're going to give you 2 minutes on that question, and then we're going to jump around on questions and bring it down to 1. But 2, bring it. Thank you.
So there are many ways to address housing disparities, and the very first that we have to pay close attention to is accessing the opportunity to even enter into housing in the first place. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about grants, not loans, that actually get into the hands of real people for down payment assistance. That is a very first step. The second step is addressing a tax code that right now has a baked-in penalization against lower income homeowners. Right now we have a property tax deduction system, we have a mortgage interest deduction system that dramatically prioritizes higher income earners over lower income earners. And so when we're talking about getting families into owning their own homes, and we're talking about stopping this push out of the middle class, then we're talking about making sure we are lifting up those people who aren't even able to enter the housing market in the first place because the tax code has this baked in systemic disparity right within it. The third piece that we need, and we can fix that at the state level, we can fix that mortgage interest piece, we can fix that down payment piece. The third piece that we need to pay attention to is renter assistance. And property taxes are something that I find fascinating. I'm that kind of lawyer who finds property taxes interesting. And I will tell you that this baked-in disparity that we have in the property tax structure hurts renters just as much as it hurts homeowners. And we absolutely have to dismantle that and undo that, because our property taxes here in New York State are the highest in the country. It's because of a system that is taxing the lowest income among us to benefit the wealthiest. We need to upend that, turn that on its head, and make sure that we are creating a system that lifts everyone up.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer. Good. All right, and so the next we'll chop the time just a little bit. No, how are we doing on time? Okay, we'll just be a little bit shorter, just to make sure that we can get through a handful of remaining questions. Okay, so this next question, and we can begin. Let's begin with Leslie, please. The question is, how do you plan to address issues in the criminal justice system, addressing mass incarceration and New York State's bills that didn't pass this year? Oh, I'm sorry. This jives into a question about healthcare, the Healthcare Act.
I can't do healthcare and criminal justice in 1 minute.
Criminal justice first. Response to that. Leslie, let's begin with you. How are you planning to address some of the issues in in the criminal justice system, mass incarceration more explicitly?
This is something that I bring my personal history as a lawyer practicing in civil rights to bear on. I have represented incarcerated women across New York State in every single prison for women across New York State, and it's something that I feel tremendously passionately about. The district that as I ran in before contained Elmira. There are 2 prisons in Elmira. We had a constitutional amendment on the ballot last fall that was designed to make sure that those incarcerated people's bodies were not counted toward gerrymandered districts without allowing them to vote. That constitutional amendment did not pass because, let's be honest, the Democrats did not put their might behind it. And that is a tremendous problem in a state that calls itself progressive on criminal justice issues. We have to address bail reform. Right now, we have a system that locks up people based on the wealth that they have. That is unconstitutional, and we cannot allow it to continue. The Republicans are attempting to rewrite history and say that that was never a problem, and I will not stand for that. We need progressives who actually stand up and get the work done.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Yeah, you can take that question as well,
Sure.
please.
So I think for me, when you talk about criminal justice, we have to recognize that we have a legal system, not a criminal justice system. That's first. And so in thinking about what that looks like in terms of policy, I believe you have to start early. And that looks like addressing things like the school to prison pipeline. So we are incarcerating our communities, especially in marginalized communities, at very large rates, starting as early as kindergarten. And so that is a critical point with regards to assessing how are folks actually entering into our criminal justice system. So looking at the school to prison pipeline system. The other piece when you think about mass incarceration is the recidivism issue. And so when I was on city council, I worked with our county leaders to actually establish a reentry task force to address this same issue, because we were letting folks out, but also not setting them up to be successful. In fact, we were putting them in place to come right back into the criminal justice system. And so addressing issues around recidivism is very critical. The other piece I will just lift up in terms of policies to consider is bail reform. Now, there were some repeals made in this legislative session. It's important that we address that because, as we know, there is a massive poverty tax when it comes to criminal justice issues. People getting fines of $500, $700, $1,000+ they can't afford it for very simple things, and then they're also getting into the criminal justice system that way. So those are just a few examples.
So if you stand on up, if you
okay.
come right to your glorious
Okay.
feet, I'll ask you the next question.
Well, all right. I feel like
All
pressure
right.
over here. What's going on?
Yeah. I'm gonna try and do. Yeah, there's like 4 more that I'm excited about.
Oh,
Okay.
man, that's what I'm playing.
All right. So it's about a good minute and a
Okay.
half. What are your legislative priorities for addressing climate change and environmental is that degradation, I believe? Yeah, you know, the deal. What's going on as it relates to our environmental circumstances. So,
Yeah.
what are some of your priorities? with
So,
climate?
I mean, the Supreme Court just gutted EPA. So that kind of set us back a little bit, just maybe. But here in New York, we actually have some incredible legislation that has been put forward through entities such as the CLCPA around protecting the climate. Are folks familiar with this, right? So one of the big things is actually implementing the recommendations that they have, such as looking at alternatives to fossil fuels, and we're experiencing the devastating costs of that, like literally. That's another piece. The other is really holding feet to the fire of a lot of these oil and gas companies. When I was on city council, a very big issue at that time was fracking, right? And we know it's going to creep its way right back up. And so we were able to actually ban fracking in the city of Binghamton. And so, yes, thank you. And so when thinking about environmental protections, one of the things that I'm excited about that's actually happening right here in Ithaca, and it's a great footprint, is around electrifying buildings. Yep, and addressing transportation with new energy. So,
Thursday, 10 o'clock, right?
oh, I
here.
didn't know that was happening.
Yeah,
Okay,
right
we
at
didn't
Southside.
rehearse that. Okay, but those are just a few things. I want to make sure I'm within my time because
Yeah.
Dr. Neal gonna be like, okay, set it down. It's okay to say, okay.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much. Can you repeat? And for you,
what was the question?
So, your legislative priorities for addressing climate change and just environmental circumstances.
So the priority that I would bring is making sure that we recognize that we are not in a climate change prevention world anymore. We are in an adaptation world. And we have to begin with that premise, and we have to recognize that the people who are going to be bearing the largest brunt of that adaptation, if we continue on the path that we're on right now, are going to be the people who have the least. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about companies like Greenwich, which is attempting to generate Bitcoin out of Seneca Lake through a mine that got passed through Governor Cuomo's office and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation back in 2016 with a deal that allowed them to avoid environmental impact statements. That cozy deal between government representatives and big, powerful corporations means that the powerful corporations are sucking up every single green electron we have, and we do not have any left for lower income people who are going to need those credits in order to move their homes to sustainable future enterprises. My legislation would turn that on its head. What we need to do is make sure that the tippity top corporations are not getting those tax credits, and instead they're going to the people who have the least.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Stand up, stay standing, Leslie.
Stay standing.
Exercise. Stand
There we go.
Down. All right, so this next question, what do you plan to do to protect women's reproductive rights?
Well, I have been doing it for 20 years, and I will not stop. I am very proud that I was one of the leaders who helped get Roe versus Wade written into New York State law in 2019. And I began working on that way back in 2008, 2009, when there were a lot of people who said, don't worry about it. Roe versus Wade is not going to get overturned. I can't tell you the number of offices that I went into, bringing my children with me, and just a quick shout out to my daughter who is here with me, who's the love of my life, along with my one. Hey, there's my husband too.
Say their names.
That's Cody, and that's Sophia, and Anna is in South America right now, so she's not here with us. But I will say that when I brought my children along with me to those meetings, into rooms that women usually don't bring their children along to talk about abortion access, I heard over and over, it's not a problem, we don't have to worry. Well, that is not true. We know that now. And I'm so glad that I stood up to get this, to help get this passed in the nick of time 3 years before the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. But what we need now is a constitutional amendment. And I started working on that a year and a half ago, and we're gonna get it done.
So for me, I shared I'm a community organizer. So I actually did a lot of work around healthcare rights and reproductive rights. We're most certainly a part of that. One of the things from a legislative standpoint that I think is important, and I also want to say from a practice standpoint. So I'll start with the practice first. One, as a practice, we need to educate folks on what we're talking about. Because again, as I said earlier, whoever controls the narrative controls the outcome, right? And so the narrative around reproductive rights is that it's not being, what's that? Oh, okay. Is that not only are reproductive rights human rights, but they are essential, right? And so that's the practice part. From the standpoint of the other P word, policy, so a week ago, the state actually held a special legislative session, Governor Hochul and the state legislature, to get the ball rolling on actually creating a constitutional amendment. So although something is codified, what happens is that it's still at the mercy of the administration who's in charge. And as we're experiencing right now, when administrations change, policies get repealed, right? So having a constitutional amendment, and so when the legislature started it this session, like special session, is just the first step. The second piece is that another legislative session needs to be held. So we need to make sure we're calling all of our state reps to bring it back up in session again, because it has to be in 2 consecutive sessions. then guess who it comes back to?
People.
Right, because now it's on the ballot and we get to vote on it. But just because it's on the ballot doesn't mean it'll pass, because goes back to my first comment about practice. We have to educate folks about this issue so that it actually can pass and become a part of our Constitution.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. All right. So beautiful. A couple more questions, and then we'll give you a few minutes to just each of you to close today. So the next question for you each, I think we do a minute and a half, maybe two. So there is currently a teacher shortage in New York State and nationally. What should the state be doing to increase the pool of teachers, and especially the pool of teachers of color?
Oh, you looking at me? Okay.
I'm looking
I guess
at
I should have remained standing. Well, all right.
I just think because I know exactly who wrote that question. Go ahead.
So funny.
Yeah,
So,
get us started.
I most certainly am an educator myself, and I also have worked with educators in K-12. I'm in higher education. One of the big things that I think with regards to teachers and appreciation goes back to what I said with regards to the last question. We have to change the narrative. The occupation of teaching and educating gets such a bad rap, and it's almost like a cognitive dissonance. Like, on one hand, if we ask someone, who was your teacher that had the most impact on you, people can name it. But then when you ask, should we be paying teachers more? No, they get paid way too much money, right? It's that level of cognitive dissonance that goes back to how the profession is being framed, and that's due in large part to policies that have created this dichotomy, right? Oversized classrooms. Regressive policies that, again, we are teaching our children to a test as opposed to learning. And so some of the policies that we need to most certainly put in place also fall around resources. So actually fully implementing the Campaign for Fiscal Equity court decision to give school districts like us here in Senate District 52 their fair share of resources, so that our teachers aren't having to ask children who already have very limited resources and are dependent upon free lunch, and for a lot of families that is their only meal, right, to buy supplies because the school doesn't have the money to support. That would help. Also, we need to pay our teachers more. I mean, and we saw this play out most certainly with COVID. We were asking teachers to, and when parents saw what teachers had to deal with and taking care of our beloved children, right? It's like it put things in a very different perspective, because now it's like, oh, now I really understand. So we have to fully fund our schools in terms of resources, in terms of how much we're paying our teachers. And the last thing I would say that helps with retention, we need to talk about the good work that's actually happening in our schools. And we don't do that enough. And so that requires us to make those investments by going to right in our own neighborhoods to start that pathway early. When you look at substitute teachers, teachers' aides, that's where you often find the most diversity in the education profession. But when it comes to actual teaching, right, in terms of teachers of color, there's not often a clear pathway for folks to make that transition. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you so much. God bless you as well.
This is the SUNY district. New York State doesn't know it yet, but we are going to tell them, because this new 52nd state Senate district includes Tompkins County, Cortland County, and most of Broome County. You have SUNY Cortland, you've got Binghamton University, you've got two community colleges. I serve on the board at Tompkins Cortland Community College, where we educate educators. We have so much opportunity here to get more people into the classroom, and we're not doing it. And why aren't we doing it? Because the money isn't there. As Leah pointed out, we need to pay teachers more. We need to get more money into the classroom. All of these challenges that we have, we need to fund them. The big question is, where are we going to get the money from? And I have a plan for that. And let me tell you, the plan is single-payer healthcare. Why, do you say? How does single-payer healthcare have anything to do with getting more money into our schools? Well, property taxes are how we pay for schools right now. And that means communities that are rich have much nicer schools than communities that are poor. And you should be able to walk into any school in New York State, whether it is in Westchester County or Long Island or Western Steuben County or the Bronx, and not know which community you're in, because the school should look equally rich and provide for every single child. How do we get there? We take the Medicaid burden off property taxes. Right now, New York State's property taxes are twice as high as they need to be, not because that money is going to our schools, but because it's going into a Medicaid program that is supposed to help low-income people access health care. Does it do that? No, because it taxes the lowest income people. Think about that. We are paying for a program designed to help low-income people access health care by taxing low-income people, and we are sucking money out of our schools to do it. We have to change that. And I'm standing up to make sure that we do.
Before we give you each an opportunity for some closing words. Wait, I didn't. I thought I read your question. I'm not sitting up here and not gonna read. These questions. I know better than that. All right, so a minute from you each, please. Yeah, all right. How would you work on getting reparations for Black people? Let's start with Leslie.
We have the money. We live in the richest state in the country, in the richest country in the world. We have a budget that is hundreds of billions. The money is there. We have to dissociate ourselves from the narrative that we can't fund reparations because we can't afford it. That is scarcity mentality, and it's not true. Okay. We have to take the money that we have and invest it in the communities that have been systematically disenfranchised. That is baked into our constitutional structure since 1789. And we have to make sure that we systematically undo that structure. Now, I will say that I am a proud progressive, and I have gained points in deeply conservative turf. I got 45% of the vote in that 32% Democratic district, and I do it by being honest. I say this point no matter who the audience is I'm speaking with. We have to take the money that we have and invest it in the people who have been systematically disenfranchised. Through reparations, I believe that 100%.
All right, thank you so much. Leah, you can take this question as well. Thank you so much.
All right.
1 minute.
So there's actually a bill at the federal level to actually make this real, right? And so Congress actually deliberated on this. Congresswoman Shirley Jackson out of Texas has been pushing for this with regards to reparations. I want to make it very clear. Reparations isn't just simply about putting money back into communities that have been marginalized. It's much deeper than that, right? And so it goes back to what I've been saying before about education. It also looks at addressing the systems and institutions that keep it going. So when you look at, for instance, representation within various entities, so financial institutions, right? Who are the folks that are on those boards and how they make money to reinvest into communities, such as things such as the Community Reinvestment Act, if folks heard of this before, right? That's another way to not only invest money, but more importantly, put people in positions to make those decisions around what investment looks like, right? Also here at the state, and we've been talking about this in different ways, when you look at our tax structure, to say it's upside down is being very modest, most certainly. There are a number of corporate tax loopholes that exist that we can actually close that also would help from not only the financial aspect, but also who is making the decision around where the money is going. A great example in terms of reparations, in my opinion, is coming right here to the Southside Community Center, right? When you think about, oftentimes when these decisions get made, they are made devoid of the folks who are literally on the ground, right? Oh, that's my nephew in the back agreeing. And so, in thinking about strategic investments, right, as pertains to reparations, it is also setting up funds. It's also setting up families when World War II happened, right, and the devastating impacts of the Holocaust. We put in a reparations system to address the wrongs that were done to our Jewish brothers and sisters in this country. And so what often happens is that people don't like talking about race and racism. And so when reparations comes up, you will hear things like, well, now isn't the time, or those people won't know what to do with the money. And that goes back to what I've been saying all along, is that we have to have the difficult conversation around our own cultural blind spots as it pertains to it. The last thing with reparations is the mediation, right? And that part often doesn't get talked about, because when you look at countries like South Africa who were impacted by apartheid, right? There were mediation efforts put in to address generational harm that has been done. And I don't know if folks are familiar with Dr. Joyce DeGruy. She has a book around the impacts of slavery, right? Where it's a generational thing that we're all impacted by, not just people of color, white folks as well. And it requires us to address those generational impacts. And so reparations is a pathway for not only healing from spirit and other things of that nature and harm that's been done, but also on the financial side. And we can most certainly do what California has done and actually pass a reparations bill right here in New York.
Sorry, stay Have you worked with individuals returning from prison and jail, or worked with loved ones of folks who have had this experience, and what is your relationship?
So as I mentioned earlier, when I was on city council, I worked with the county to implement a reentry task force to address issues around recidivism. And there's no way that for any of us in this room, whether you're black, white, Latinx, that we don't know someone that's in prison. Because the United States is a highly incarcerated country. We imprison more folks than we actually employ. When you think about it from a historical standpoint, in terms of the years and years, right? And so for me, having programs like a reentry task force, but that's just one piece of it. Because we also need to work with employers to give people opportunities when they do come out to have not just jobs, but good paying jobs. Making sure that they get access to affordable quality health care. Making sure that we talk about the support needed for their families, right? That often doesn't get talked about, because as a family member, you're trying to reacclimate your loved one back into society. And we need to talk about mental health services. That also goes hand in hand. And so those are legislative things I would most certainly push for, and I actually have pushed for at the local level, but I would love to amplify and push for at the state level. But it's going to take all y'all. Y'all going to help?
Yeah. Okay. Everybody, let's see a minute to answer that question as well.
Tell me again.
Some work with individuals returning from prison, or work with families who have folks who've been incarcerated. What's your experience?
Yes, I have. My legal work has been a lot with people who are currently incarcerated, and then setting aside my legal work, my political work and my community organizing work has really involved a lot of people who are formally incarcerated. And I'd like to just pause a minute and talk about how we even use that term, formally incarcerated, because that puts people into a box that then creates challenges for them in housing, in income, in job opportunities going forward. And I'd like to dismantle that term. Elmira, as I mentioned, has 2 New York State prisons where the people are counted toward gerrymandered districts, but they are not able to vote. And the families of those incarcerated people move to be near their loved ones. Most of the people incarcerated in Elmira are not from Elmira. They are from somewhere downstate, and they have been forcibly relocated, and their families follow them. I have done a lot of work with that community, and I want to just conclude by saying I come to this with a very personal experience. I have a brother who is incarcerated and has been incarcerated for the last 14 years. And I have been very proud to be a part of the Alliance of Families for Justice organization that provides support for people who have incarcerated family members. And I recognize the deep challenges that exist for one of those people. And it's exceptionally greater if you're not coming from my background. Thank you.
So with this last question, I'll start with you, Leslie. I'll give you a little time to wrap this one up. No, I'm mumbling. That's why you can't hear me. You'll hear me when I'm articulating my words. I'm getting there. Here we go. All right. So, Leslie, if you can get started, tell us about a time in your life you felt proud that you made a difference that has also benefited Black people in your community. A time where you felt proud that you made a difference in a way that benefited Black people in your community. Go for it.
I am very proud that I was one of the people who worked very hard to make sure that a labor union representative ended up on the Industrial Development Agency in Chemung County. And why was that important? Because when that labor union representative ended up on the IDA, and I don't know how much you folks know about IDAs and how much power they carry in a community and how much they make decisions about where the money goes and which businesses get invested in and everything else. Chemung County had never had a labor union representative there. And when that labor union representative joined, that was then an entry point for Jerome Emanuel, who ran for county executive in deeply conservative Chemung County, to step up and run and carry his vision of progressive values across deeply conservative Chemung County. Those are the paths that we have to lay. We have to make sure that those of us who have the opportunity are laying a path for people who do not necessarily have my skin color to step on that path and move forward. And I'm very proud that I was part of helping to make sure that happened.
Thank you so much. All right, Leah, telling us about a time in your life you felt proud that you made a difference that benefited Black people in your community.
So I have several examples, but one I think is kind of very salient in this moment has to do with issues around fresh food access. In our region, we have our child poverty rate is double the state average and triple. And so one of the things that I was able to do, not only as a legislator, but looking at and making key investments on issues and amplifying it in the first place, right? And so one of the things I was actually able to do was to establish through zoning, green zoning, so where you have, in a lot of areas, especially that are underserved, you have a lot of abandoned properties, right? They look like kind of, they always call them like black eyes, right? That's what they call it in different circles. I never called it that. I always thought that was a very odd framing. But essentially, they are byproducts of disinvestment, where you see a lot of liquor stores, drug stores, but you don't see grocery stores or even community gardens or things of that nature. And so during my time on city council, in working with residents in my district, but also leaders at the county level, was to really establish programs such as community gardens, urban farms, things of that nature, to give people more access to fresh and healthy foods, but also jobs. So one of the other things that kind of ties into this, and so I'm the vice president of my local NAACP, and we actually started a youth employment program where we are actively recruiting youth ages 14 to 28 for employment opportunities through entities in my community like Vines that actually shows folks how to do community gardens, produce their own food, and we're actually creating pathways for youth to get connected on a pathway, not just for a job, but on careers. And so that's one of the things I'm most proud of, because I've had several youth that have come back who have said, like, thank you for even allowing me to have the space, because it wasn't just simply about getting them an opportunity, but also getting them prepared, such as knowing how to do an interview, how to advocate for yourself when you get to the workplace and you encounter microaggressions. Like, how do you manage that, right? How do you bring other folks with you with regards to engaging in those opportunities? And so those are just some of the things that I'm proud of.
Thank you so much. Yes. And we have made glorious time today. And again, just running on, I'm big on this time thing because I be going over all the time. But I'm so grateful for this opportunity to hear both of your voices. I feel like this is, and now you've been to other forums. This is different, right? Yeah, we offer a little something different in terms of giving you an opportunity to share who you are. And in this space where we honor ourselves and we ensure that folks who join this space honor us as well. And we feel like both of you have done a beautiful job of that. But thank you for sharing yourselves, for answering the questions. Thank you for your questions. Apologies if I didn't get to you, but I want to make sure I got to you. You got it, Ma? I check in with my elders and make sure we are on point. But thank you. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you, both of you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions and your support and support of Southside Community Center. Yes.
This is probably one of my favorite ones.
Yes, a little different flavor.
A little flavor, as you said earlier.
That's
Sprinkle a little sauce.
That's it. Thank you all so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday evening. Remember to check us out next weekend for the Harriet Tubman Weekend Extraordinaire, and then July 30th at the Commons for Come Out. And you're welcome to walk by any early morning. We're nice and loud out here.
And even this Thursday morning.